We go to Portland, Oregon, and there he is, John Canzano.
What's up? How you doing?
I'm doing a little under the weather. I'm doing okay.
Okay.
Not feeling great, but you know what? We're going to
You're doing better than Troy Taylor today.
What did I miss with
Stanford
Troy
has fired Troy Taylor just in the last few minutes that you've been on the show. Andrew Luck put a statement out on behalf of Stanford. They're moving in another direction.
Hadn't Troy Taylor been there for 2 years?
2 years. 3-9 success. Then obviously the report that came out last week about his harassment or how he treated people. I think the quote that was in the report is that he was an equal opportunity asshole. That's what they said. He tended to be more combative with women than men, but you can't walk around as an equal opportunity a-hole and be 3-9. That's the overall message. You can be 9-3. They probably tolerate you, but sure. 3-9, no.
All right. Well, Well, now what direction are they going to go? And we'll get that in a second. John Canzano, JohnCanzano.com, brought to you by Zeke's Pizza, homegrown in the Northwest. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com. Of course, you can follow John on Twitter and Blue Sky, John Canzano BFT. He's got a radio show. It's world-renowned. It's great. Bald-Faced Truth in Portland, Oregon, 7:50 the game from 3 to 6 o'clock, and he joins us from the Limbach Lumber Studios. All right, so let's just start there. Andrew Luck, so I can't remember. He's not the AD, he's the GM, right?
He's the GM, but the problem they have is Bernard Muir, the athletic director, also announced that, he's stepping down or he was pushed out, resigned, however you want to frame it. Stanford clearly moving in another direction because the world's moving in another direction. And then the report comes out about Taylor and his mistreatment of people. And, I didn't have a great relationship with him. And I mean, by great, I just didn't have very many interactions with him. I interviewed him a couple of times. And so I didn't see that side of him, but, 2 separate investigations. I didn't like his response when the thing went public. He issues a statement saying it's something he's working on. I mean, you've got to go stronger there, particularly when you're in that Stanford community where the stakeholders care about more than, just football. They care about other things and the brand and the image of the university. So they're moving in another direction. Andrew Luck saying they'll hire a new coaching staff in time for 2025.
Okay, so it's interesting how with the AD now being out, and this is now a trend in college sports, these GMs who are taking over the programs. I think I just saw something earlier today that University of Utah is hiring, I think somebody as a GM for the basketball program. But we're seeing colleges do these GMs. Are we going to get to a point where the GMs now just take over the programs and they're the actual athletic directors? And there's no longer going to be an athletic director?
Well, I think there'll be an athletic director, but it's interesting. The more that I talk with ADs, and I've talked to a ton of them in the last year, the job has changed. They're not doing the same job that they did once upon a time, Puck. And you're seeing a lot of the ADs that are in their late 50s and early 60s kind of go, hey, I'm out of here. This isn't the job I signed on for. They no longer have contact with athletes like they used to. They're not finding themselves at practices like they used to. They're dealing with the house settlement. They're dealing with NIL. They're so detached from the job that it once was. And so this GM job has come in, and like some of the schools have said, hey, look, we're going to have a general manager that's just in charge of football. We're going to model this much like the player personnel director or the GM in an NFL setting. Others have come in, like in basketball, and said, hey, we're going to have one GM be in charge of both the men's and women's programs. And that GM will be dealing a lot with NIL, a lot with travel, a lot with kind of the old things that, that we used to see athletic directors deal with and be at practice and be much more in tune with teams and coaches and assistant coaches and building a staff and building a schedule. So, yeah, I think, you're seeing kind of the splintering of these jobs happen. And, I talked to John Hollinger, the longtime sports writer who became a general manager with the Memphis Grizzlies in the NBA. He talked about kind of the notion that you're seeing some of the teams clearly go towards a pro model and others kind of dabbling and a little unsure of what they're doing. So, let's see how this unfolds.
What did you make of the news this morning? Do you think it will be a trend of St. Francis announcing that they're going to drop from D1 to D3? You think we're going to see more schools do this, or do you think this is maybe just an isolated case.
I think it's going to happen. I don't think you're going to see like a caving in of the system, but I think you're going to see some schools make some hard decisions where they just say, "Hey, we can't compete. We can't spend. We can't spend on the level. And so what's the point?" And Stanford's a school I've wondered about because they do the Olympic sports so well, and they profess to be this kind of campus that is above the rat race of college athletics. And so I always kind of wondered when I looked at Stanford, like, are they long for this college football world? But given that there's so much money in it, and if you're already in a Power Four, you probably stay put. But will they spend like the other Power Four schools? Probably not. Probably won't get engaged like that. But I do think you're going to see some self-selection happen, particularly with schools that are kind of on that bubble. Some of the Big Sky schools come to mind. Are they tired of trying to compete with, they're playing football games against SEC schools, and then, and you're in the Big Sky. Come on.
Could you see a school like Washington State making a decision like that?
No, but there's a self-selection that's happening within even like the Pac-12, right? So you're kind of watching these new world Pac-12 schools decide how much they're going to spend, and Oregon State's going, "Hey, we're going to spend like we're a Power Four member. We're going to go all in. We're going to be at the top of the new world Pac-12 because guess what? We want to be part of whatever's happening next in college athletics." So is Boise State. So is San Diego State. Washington State, the messaging I get, or at least I got from Kirk Schultz, the outgoing president, not the new president, was much more fiscally responsible, much more measured, much more, we're not going to be that kind of school. I don't know that Washington State's regents agreed with Schultz. Like, clearly we saw some different opinion there, but I think Washington State within the Pac-12, let's see what their budget ends up every year. And that budget's going to signal to everybody whether or not they're serious about trying to win.
Yeah, it's when I saw that this morning, it just was a concern of mine because I just don't know if that school that has, financial issues can compete at the level that these other schools can compete at.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be some doomsdayer, and I don't think it's on the horizon, but I think there was the Texas AD, I think I mentioned in one of the stories I just briefly skimmed this morning, that this is going to be a widening of the gap because certain schools just won't be able to afford to do so. Hey, along those lines, John, I saw something this morning. So we got the House settlement that's coming up soon,
right?
But now there's another lawsuit that's going to be right after this.
Well, look, I think number one, the House settlement is ongoing, and there's some question too about Washington State and Oregon State. They're named as part of the Pac-12, which are, they're Power 5 schools, but will they be required to opt into the damages, or will they not? And yes, there's a line of other lawsuits that are coming because the lawyers smell money. Yeah. There's a weakness or a vulnerability in the system and a real willingness from these NCAA schools and the NCAA itself to settle. So yeah, there's a line of lawsuits and probably going to end up suing this thing into some other form or fashion. But, I was told by somebody in the Power Four to keep an eye on whether or not Oregon State and Washington State are ultimately asked to pay their share of the House settlement, or are they allowed out of it? Because if they're asked to pay, Washington State and Oregon State can say with a straight face, "Hey, we're included here when there's damages, but you're not including us as a Power Four member. Like, what gives here?" And so there's some talk, some whisper right now about Washington State and Oregon State, and will the SEC and the Big Ten go, "Hey, no, we got you," because they don't want to give them a big distribution when it comes to the CFP and other ways that it benefits them.
What do you think those two schools would want to hear?
They want to pay. They want to pay,
so they're recognized as a Power Four.
Recognize us as a Power Four. Now we can go into the room when we negotiate our CFP distributions, and we can go, wait a minute, by no fault of our own, we went from a Power 5 member to a Power 4 member. We're named in the lawsuit. We're participating at full value with this settlement, this House settlement. Look, nothing changed for us. And autonomy 5, autonomy 4, that's a media term in most ways. But when it comes to like things like this college football playoff distribution or the House settlement, yeah, there's some money attached to it.
Yeah. You spent a day or two in Seattle, in our fabulous city. I'm sorry we
Awesome.
couldn't cross paths. I was coming back from Arizona, then you were off doing reporter things. What did you make of the first round of the tournament, at least those first wave of games of watching basketball inside Climate Pledge?
Well, let's first start with the idea that Climate Pledge is a fantastic upgrade of what, oh my gosh, like what a great place to watch a hockey game or a basketball game. Just makes so much sense. People walking around the Space Needle wearing their Sonics jerseys. This is nothing new for you. But for me, it was interesting to see it up close and to go, wow, like, this building, it's ready. Like this fan base is ready. We knew that, but the building's ready. And, if the Kraken have done anything, they have sort of provided this beta test for the NBA. And, like right now, it could happen tomorrow if Adam Silver said it. So I just thought that was really amazing. And it really was the narrative that came outside. And so for people in Seattle that are watching this, like, you knew about Climate Pledge, you knew about that building and the upgrades, but there were a lot of people who were seeing it for the first time, watching these NCAA tournament games and being in person there. And to a person, people were talking about it, Puck. And so I think, a lot of people pent up thinking that NBA Seattle, Las Vegas announcement, it's the worst kept secret in the league. It's going to happen now that the Celtics have set a valuation at $6 billion for a franchise. Those owners in the NBA are counting that money and spending it already. So that was a takeaway. But the tournament itself, I'm a little disappointed in. I mean, I think the selection committee was manipulated. I think the Power Four conferences ended up with far more bids and far more better seating than they should have. It's ruined some of the charm of it. I think it can be rectified next year. I don't think it's ruined the tournament, but a school like Gonzaga is a great example. They're seated as an 8 or a 9 in that first round matchup and probably should have been like a 4 or 5. And, they proved it on the court against Houston. And people are going to hold up the seeds and they're going to be like, oh, the seeds held up. The committee got it right. Well, they stacked the deck. I mean, and it hasn't been as fun as other tournaments. And I'm hearing that from readers and listeners.
I think I would say as a consumer, I think that this wave of games like Saturdays, like the second round games or after the first wave, I thought those were great. I thought they were I just thought Sunday, I thought Arizona, Oregon was just phenomenal basketball. And it was hard to watch at times for me personally, being a Pac-10, Pac-12 fan, because I'm like, they should be talking about the Pac-12 conference and not the Big 12 and the Big 10. So it was kind of bittersweet. I would agree. I mean, we usually get a Cinderella or we get an upset or two, a last second buzzer in the very first day on Thursday, Friday. We didn't get that. And I think that's what's kind of soured people, but I thought the second wave, the Saturday and Sunday, were much better. And then that's been the theme, right? The theme has the new age of college athletics, NIL, ruined that? Yeah. Is it somehow going to now look more like where it's the two power conferences and we don't have, a Cinderella run by, I don't know, San Diego State or Oral Roberts or Florida Atlantic? Yep. I don't know. I mean, I don't. Yeah. I mean, it's changing. You see all those players transferring, but then there's also players that are transferring up, right, or even down to those schools.
Yeah, like Oregon had Mookie Cook, who just posted on social media that he's getting into the portal. There's a 5-star recruit that had a bright future, and that was a guy that Dana Altman was counting on, but he's getting in the portal. And so roster retention is big, and the Power Four schools they've got more money to retain those rosters. And so TJ Bamba, great example of that. Like, Washington State fans have watched him go, and here he is. He lands at Oregon. It was interesting because Oregon's roster, Puck, had 4 or 5 players that were from like Colorado, Washington State, that played at other schools. And so I was kind of looking at that going, gosh, what a weird amalgam of talent. I think there's 2 things going on. One, there's an incredible amount of pressure on the selection committee to reward the Power Four teams and seed them because they're afraid that the Power Four is going to seize control of this thing. And I think they're trying to preemptively be like, hey, you're okay having us manage this thing.
We'll take care of you. Don't worry about it.
We got you. Just like the playoff football committee. But so I think that's one. And then two is your point about NIL is well taken. We saw the rise of the mid-major when the one and dones became a thing. And Kentucky had, and Memphis and, Louisville and Oregon had all these one and done players. They couldn't compete with Butler, who had 5th year seniors, right? Guys that were shaven and had, married, and they had different problems than the one and dones, right? So it was like the rise of the mid-major happened in a blink, and now we're back to who's got the money, who's got the bag, and are they really going to have a hard salary cap? And how much of that is going to basketball in particular? Because football is going to get like 85 cents on the dollar with all of that $20.5 million that you can spend. So what happens then, Puck? Are we back to an era where there's a bag being handed under the table to players, and guess who can afford to do that better than others? It's the big guys.
It's probably still happening. I just don't think that probably just still hasn't gone away. I just think I'm not going to overreact to this year, and I want to maybe see it next year and then the year after. Because again, we're not far. Are we a year removed, 2 years removed from San Diego State in the Final Four?
Right. And I don't want to do that either. Like, the sample size is small.
Yeah, it's.
But I don't like what I'm seeing right now, and it's a little troubling and not as fun. It's just not as fun.
I got you. Speaking of, I was going to get to Gonzaga in a second, but speaking of Gonzaga, you have traveled. You put boots on the ground in Spokane, Washington. They got so many names in Spokane. Spoke Vegas, Spoke Compton. My favorite has always been Spokanistan. What did you make of Spokane, Washington, and the campus of Gonzaga University? John, it was just there, just published a long story on sitting down there and getting the landscape, the lay of the land of Gonzaga athletics.
I mean, my aim was to, can I bring my readers to these new World Pac-12 places? And I did Boise. Now I was doing Spokane and Gonzaga. What makes Gonzaga Gonzaga? I talked to the mayor. I got a one-on-one with the mayor of Spokane. And she's like this 68-year-old lady who came there when she was 20. And, a guy brought her there, a boyfriend brought her there. And then, she stayed. Now she's the mayor. It's pretty interesting city. Relationships matter there probably more than some other communities. You look at the president at Gonzaga, the AD at Gonzaga, and the head basketball coach, Mark Few, at Gonzaga. You add up their combined tenure, it's like 60 years. Chris Standiford, the athletic director, walked me around, and he's like, hey, when Mark Few leaves, he says, people all wonder what's going to happen to Gonzaga. He says, I can tell you what's going to happen to Gonzaga. Mark Few's going to stick around and make sure that his baby is taken care of. That's the kind of community it is. And so it really does the piece it helps explain what makes Gonzaga go, how Spokane and the geography of Spokane, and the fact that there are 4 universities within 80 miles of Spokane, including Washington State. Washington State's got a presence there. It's a real college town that has this old feel to the downtown with some cool restaurants and coffee shops. But Gonzaga basically led on to me that, they knew that they were Plan 1B as it pertained to the Pac-12's rebuild. They knew that they were Plan 1B, right? So they knew that it was the 5 Mountain West schools, and then it was the potential to go get, Tulane and Memphis. But, Gonzaga comes in as this Plan 1B and knows that when it didn't happen for the Pac-12 and Memphis and Tulane, that things really ramped up. And the thing that helped Gonzaga is they had already been in these negotiations and talks with the Big 12. Mark Few told me that Gonzaga talked to the Pac-12 when George Kliavkov was commissioner and talked about potentially coming in as a basketball edition, or maybe would they come in all sports? How would that work? And so they had done all the legwork. So when the Pac-12 seemingly struck out with Memphis and Tulane, and there's a lot in that deal that's interesting to me, but when that doesn't happen, they pivot to Gonzaga, and Teresa Gold does a smart thing. She goes in person to Spokane. They really appreciated that. That meant something to Gonzaga, and probably meant more to Gonzaga than anywhere else. It's a lot like the Washington State fan who felt marginalized in the Pac-12. Gonzaga had been marginalized by, hey, the Big East doesn't really want to do a deal with you. The Big 12 doesn't really, the presidents don't want to do a deal with you. But here comes the Pac-12, and gosh, they're showing up in person. That meant a lot to Gonzaga, and they were all about it. That's why it happened. It's why it happened quickly. They were ready. They were restless. But it was Chris Stanford, the AD, told me. I said, he says it's not one or two people. He says it's the place. I found that interesting because there's not a lot of schools that see themselves as the place. And here's a little bit of news, Puck, wrapped up in it. I did find out while there, Gonzaga is coming in as a full share media member to the Pac-12. So they're going to get a whole share of the media distribution, which includes football, whatever. You can't back that out. But Gonzaga is not going to have expenses on the football side. They will not get postseason distributions on the football side. So they're not, if there's a college football playoff distribution, if Boise State wins enough games, or, Oregon State or Washington State make the CFP in the expanded form, Gonzaga presumably does not get a share of that postseason payout, which is a huge advantage to the football playing members. That
is good. What about for basketball?
Basketball, they do. They get they
get more at all.
Well, they will. The Pac-12 is adopting this revenue sharing model that rewards the member that gets the bid. So if you're Gonzaga and you go to the Final Four, yes, you'll get a bigger share because you earned it. You eat what you kill, so to speak. Same will happen in football. That let's say Washington State or Oregon State, they make the playoff, they win the conference, they make the playoff. They're going to get a larger share of the distribution as it pertains to the CFP. And it's interesting to me that Gonzaga is not getting a share of that, but it makes sense if you think about it. They don't have football expenses, so they will not share in the postseason revenue for football.
Okay. Any news on media rights expansion at all?
It just feels close. And it's funny because the AD at Gonzaga said something to me. I started poking around, and he said, he goes, they're telling us less and less because they know you're around and you're talking to all the ADs. So I thought that was funny, but it feels like it's close. You had JD Wicker, the San Diego State AD, say end of the month. We're not at the end of the month yet. I realize people are restless.
Sure.
But I kind of am looking, Puck, at that window after the Elite Eight, before the Final Four, during the Crown tournament. There's some teams that are playing in that Fox tournament that are Pac-12 teams, multiple teams in it.
Sure.
I'm kind of curious if Fox is one of the partners, if they try to blow it up in that window and they go, hey, we got a deal and here's the deal. So keep an eye on it.
All right, that got me thinking. The portal is open for basketball, like right now. Are they going to change that? Because you got guys. There's players that are entering the portal with teams still in. Now there's some that they don't play though. I think it's Pippen's kid from Michigan's in the portal. He doesn't play, but Michigan's still alive, right? So
terrible distraction.
Well, it's just I don't. It's like. There might be other guys in the portal like right now that we don't know about that are like playing on and contributing to the team. It just seems like awful timing for it.
Yeah. You saw more than 500 players immediately jumped in, and there's a problem there. Problem in football, problem in basketball, problem in general. They've got to get rails on it. They're going to need lawmakers to step in because, what'll happen the moment they put some guardrails on it is you're going to get a case like the kid who, left to go to Miami, who said, I don't need to get in the portal. I'll just circumvent it. I think you'll see athletes that would circumvent the portal if they tried to put, a guideline on it. So collective bargaining's coming. Separation of the haves and the have-nots is already happening. Meanwhile, we're all filling out our brackets and holding on to the past.
Yeah. I got a question in our chat as we wrap up from Big Mike. He wants me to ask you about MLB to Portland. Got an update there for Big Mike.
Yeah, look, the Portland Diamond Projects, they released the renderings. They've asked the state legislature for an expansion of the jock tax that stood to give the project $150 million. People are really struggling with the jock tax. I don't know why, but let's just say hypothetically, in the state of Oregon, you have a state income tax. Steph Curry makes $55.7 million a year. He's the highest paid player in the league. He plays a game in Portland. He pays 1/82 of his salary. He's taxed on that in the state of Oregon. It's about a 9.9% rate. So the state of Oregon collects about $67,000 for Steph Curry playing that game. he pays income tax. Steph Curry will pay income tax in every city, NBA city that has a state income tax. Yeah. So what the Diamond Project has done to help fund their stadium is they said, hey, we want a bond of $150 million. Maybe can we expand it, to as much as $800 million, depending on, what the state legislature will let them do. And they want to say, look, we're going to tax visiting players' salaries, and we're going to tax the home players' salaries. Look at the payrolls. Look at the payroll for the Yankees. Look at the payroll for the even the Oakland A's or the Sacramento A's or whatever we want to call them. And then look, can we get a bond based on those figures? But people are going, no public money. But the thing you have to explain is there's no team, there's no public money. If there's a team, it's not like you're getting taxed. It's not like I'm getting taxed. It's a jock tax. It's a bond based on taxes, income taxes for visiting and home players. It's not going to affect schools. It's not going to affect roads, but people hear public money and
they hear taxes. Yeah. They hear taxes and it's just like, no. We got bigger things. The schools, the kids, we can't do it. All right.
But okay, Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge are paying for this. All right. Are you okay with that? I'm okay with that.
Can I ask you something on the jock tax?
Yeah.
Does Steph Curry or any other player only pay if they actually play?
That is a question because they're called duty days. And I have wondered if players
are using that instead of the rest, the load management.
Yeah. I'm in California. California's got the highest income tax. It's 14.4%. So, when Luka got traded to Lakers, he lost money because the state of Texas does not have an income tax. So Anthony Davis was a big winner. I mean, that was a huge amount of money to have 30 or 40 home games in a state that's 14.4%. I do think they still pay the tax. The guy who you should follow is Sports Tax Guy on Twitter, Robert Raiola.
Sports Tax Guy. Perfect.
Robert Raiola. He's in New Jersey. You should get him on your show. He's kind of this East Coast.
Love it.
Got a lot of flavor and character to him.
Yeah.
But, Raiola told me it's a duty day. So I still think even if Steph Curry doesn't play, it's 1/82nd of his salary. Right. He's still getting paid, right? Yeah. If he gets paid for that day, he pays tax for that day.
All right. Okay. All right. That makes sense. All right. Last thing, and I promise we're done.
Yeah.
Reading your mailbag, and you mentioned that you watch White Lotus. What was your reaction when Sam Rockwell was given the monologue?
Man. The whole White Lotus show.
I just was like, what is going on?
It just kept going. It was like Pulp Fiction. it just kept going. It unfolded in a way.
And the guy's character, which I'm blanking on his name, was so perfect. How he just was like,
What a great performance. And it was both actors, too.
Phenomenal.
The other guy, I can't remember his name, but the other guy in the scene, his jaw was open like everybody watching at home. And it was just the look on his face. It was just a brilliant scene by two really good actors. But the whole show, White Lotus, it starts off in this season. It's a little like Whale Wars. Like you never see a whale. Like nothing happens. They're just kind of drifting around in the ocean, running out of gas and fighting with each other. So, it was a little bit like Whale Wars. Now stuff's starting to happen. I'm in. But they did a great job of making us wait for the payoff and making us really uncomfortable. All the characters make me uncomfortable. Thing.
It's just I love how they do it. I love how he writes it and directs it and shows it to you. It's really brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. You're the best. Thank you. JohnCanzano.com. Listen to the radio show Baldface Truth down there in Portland, Oregon. Starts at 3 o'clock. Follow him on all social media channels. John Canzano BFT. Weekly visit brought to you by Zeke's Pizza. Go visit Zeke'sPizza.com. Full episode up on YouTube later. Also, it will be part of the Daily Puck Drop, which you can find the audio podcast there, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. All right, John. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, pal.
There he is.